Zimora grew up with a heart full of kindness, always eager to help those in need. She spent her days fetching water from the river, tending to the elders, and learning the wisdom of the land from her father. Though she missed her mother dearly, she found comfort in her father's love and in the beauty of Ukuta, a village known for its fertile lands and strong warriors. But not everyone saw her with kind eyes. Wandia, her stepmother, resented her presence from the moment she set foot in their home. She saw Zimora as a constant reminder of Babakiano's first wife and believed that only her daughter, Shani, deserved the life of privilege. While Babakiano was around, Wandia pretended to be kind, but the moment he left for council meetings or village duties, her true nature revealed itself. "You are not special," Wandia would sneer as she made Zimora do all the household chores. "You are just a burden." Shani, spoiled and pampered by her mother, treated Zimora no better. She would watch with amusement as Zimora scrubbed the floors or carried heavy firewood while she lounged in the shade. "Why should I work when I have a servant?" she would laugh, while Wandia simply smiled in approval. Despite the cruelty, Zimora never complained. She endured, believing that one day her father would see the truth. But fate had other plans. One evening, dark clouds gathered over Ukuta as Babakiano prepared to leave on a long journey. He had been summoned by the elders of a neighboring village for an important council meeting that could take weeks. Before he left, he embraced Zimora tightly. "Be strong, my daughter," he said. "When I return, I will bring you something special." His words warmed Zimora's heart, and she clung to the hope that things would soon change. But the moment Babakiano's footsteps faded into the distance, Wandia set her cruel plan into motion. She spread whispers throughout the village, telling the people that Zimora carried a dark curse. "Have you noticed how sickness has come upon our household?" she told the neighbors. "Ever since her mother died, misfortune follows us. It is the girl. She is cursed." Some villagers, easily swayed by rumors, began to avoid Zimora. They whispered behind her back and turned away when she passed. Wandia smiled in satisfaction. But she knew that mere gossip was not enough. She wanted Zimora gone forever. That night, while the moon hung low in the sky, Wandia woke Zimora with a harsh shake. "Get up," she ordered. "You don't belong here anymore." Confused and afraid, Zimora rubbed her sleepy eyes. "What do you mean, stepmother? You are not my daughter," Wandia spat. "You are nothing but a burden, and now you will leave this house forever." Two village guards, bribed by Wandia, grabbed Zimora by the arms and dragged her out of the house. She struggled, tears streaming down her face. "Please, where are you taking me?" Wandia smirked. "To a place where you belong." The guards dragged her through the darkened village, past the empty marketplace, and towards the dreaded Ngome Forest, a place feared by all. Legends spoke of spirits that haunted its depths, of creatures that never let those who entered return. Zimora's heart pounded in her chest. "No, please don't leave me here," she begged. But the guards showed no mercy. They pushed her forward and without another word, disappeared into the night, leaving her alone in the vast, endless darkness. The wind howled through the trees, and eerie sounds echoed in the distance. Trembling, Zimora wrapped her arms around herself. She was abandoned, forsaken. But little did she know, fate had a greater plan. Wandia had always despised Zimora. No matter how kind or hard-working the girl was, Wandia could not bear the sight of her. Every time she looked at Zimora, she was reminded of Babakiano's first wife, Mama Siti, whose memory still lived in the hearts of the villagers. Wandia wanted her own daughter, Shani, to have everything: love, wealth, and respect. But as long as Zimora remained in their home, she feared Shani would always be second, and so she devised a cruel plan to rid herself of the girl once and for all. She began planting seeds of doubt in Babakiano's mind. Every time something went wrong, when a goat fell ill, when a storm damaged their roof, when food supplies ran low, she would sigh dramatically and say, "Ever since her mother passed, this house has been cursed." At first, Babakiano dismissed it as nonsense, but Wandia was patient. She repeated it again and again, whispering it to the neighbors, the elders, and even the village children. "Have you not noticed?" she would ask. "Trouble follows wherever she goes." The rumors spread like wildfire. Some villagers began to avoid Zimora. Others whispered behind her back, casting uneasy glances whenever she passed. Even Babakiano, though he still loved his daughter, could not ignore the growing fear in the village. Wandia watched him struggle with doubt and knew her plan was working, but she could not wait for him to make a decision. She had to act while he was away. One evening, as Baba Kiano left for an important journey to a distant village, Wandia wasted no time. As soon as night fell, she stormed into Zimora's small room and yanked the blanket off her. "Get up," she ordered coldly. Zimora blinked in confusion, still half asleep. "Stepmother, what's wrong?" Wandia's face twisted with hatred. "You do not belong in this house. You never have." Zimora sat up, fear creeping into her chest. "What do you mean?" "I mean you are cursed. You bring misfortune to this home, and I will not allow it any longer." Tears welled in Zimora's eyes. "That's not true. Baba Kiano, your father is not here," Wandia interrupted. "And when he returns, he will thank me for what I've done." Before Zimora could say another word, 2 village guards appeared at the doorway. Their faces were blank, their orders already given. Wandia pointed at Zimora. "Take her away." "No, please," Zimora cried, struggling as the guards grabbed her arms. "Where are you taking me?" "To the place where all cursed children belong," Wandia said with a wicked smile. The guards dragged Zimora through the village, past the sleeping homes and silent streets, toward the edge of the dense Ngome Forest. Everyone in Ukuta feared the forest. It was said to be haunted by spirits, a place where no one who entered ever returned. Even the bravest hunters never dared to go too deep. Zimora's heart pounded in terror. "Please don't leave me here," she begged, her feet digging into the dirt as she tried to resist. "I have done nothing wrong." The guards said nothing. They threw her forward, their duty complete, then turned and walked away without a second glance. Zimora stumbled, landing on her knees as she watched them disappear into the night. The wind howled through the towering trees, and eerie sounds echoed in the distance. Cold fear wrapped around her. She was alone, abandoned. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged herself tightly. She did not know what lay ahead, but she had no choice but to move forward. With one last glance at the world she had lost, Zimora took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown, unaware that fate had a greater plan for her. Zimora wandered through the dense Ngome Forest, her body weak and trembling with fear. The night was alive with strange sounds, whispers carried by the wind, the rustling of unseen creatures, and the distant hoot of an owl. Every step she took felt heavier than the last. Her bare feet ached from the rough ground, her stomach churned with hunger, and her throat was dry from crying. She had never felt so alone. After what felt like hours, she stumbled upon a massive baobab tree, its thick, ancient trunk stretching high into the sky. She leaned against it, breathing heavily. Her body could go no further. The pain, the hunger, the fear, it was all too much. With a soft sigh, she slid down to the ground and closed her eyes. Maybe this was the end. Maybe the forest would swallow her, just as the village had cast her away. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, a soft voice spoke. "So, this is where fate has led you." Zimora's eyes fluttered open, and she gasped. Standing before her was an old woman, her back slightly bent with age, but her eyes sharp and knowing. She wore a flowing robe made of woven leaves, and her hair, long and silver, was adorned with tiny beads that shimmered in the moonlight. A wooden staff rested in her hand, and around her neck hung a necklace of bones and stones. She did not look afraid of the forest. Instead, she seemed to belong to it. Zimora tried to sit up, but her limbs were too weak. Who are you?" she whispered. The woman knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on her forehead. "I am called Mama Jahi," she said, "and you, child, are not abandoned. You are chosen." Zimora's brow furrowed in confusion. "Chosen? For what?" Mama Jahi smiled, but instead of answering, she helped Zimora to her feet. "Come," she said, "you have much to learn." Too weak to resist, Zimora leaned on Mama Jahi as they walked deeper into the forest. After a short journey, they arrived at a small hut made of mud and straw, nestled between towering trees. A fire burned in a stone pit outside, and dried herbs hung from wooden beams. The scent of healing plants filled the air. It was a simple place, but it felt warm and safe. Inside, Mama Jahi gave Zimora a bowl of thick, warm porridge. "Eat," she urged. "You will need your strength." Zimora ate in silence, her body grateful for the nourishment. As she finished, Mama Jahi sat across from her, studying her carefully. "You think your suffering was a punishment," she said, "but the world does not work that way. Everything that happens is a path leading us to where we are meant to be." Zimora lowered her gaze. I was cast out by my own family, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I have no home. No one wants me. Mama Jahi shook her head. No, child. You do not see the truth yet. The greatest souls are often tested the hardest. But inside you is a fire, and if you learn to control it, you will become stronger than you ever imagined. Over the next few weeks, Mama Jahi taught Zimora how to survive in the wild. She showed her which plants could heal wounds, which roots could be eaten, and which berries were poisonous. She taught her how to listen to the sounds of the forest, to read the whispers of the wind, and to move like the shadows, unseen and silent. Zimora learned quickly. She fetched water from hidden streams, built fires from dry twigs, and tended to the sick animals that Mama Jahi cared for. She no longer feared the forest. She became a part of it. One day, as they sat by the fire, Mama Jahi took Zimora's hands in her own. You were born under the star of the lion, she said. Do you know what that means? Zimora shook her head. It means you are destined for greatness, Mama Jahi continued. The world tried to break you, but it only made you stronger. One day, you will return to Ukuta. And when you do, you will not be the girl they abandoned. You will be the woman they never expected. Zimora's heart pounded in her chest. Could it be true? Could she truly be more than what her stepmother had claimed? Mama Jahi's eyes gleamed with certainty. Trust in your strength, child, she said. The world is not done with you yet. And from that day forward, Zimora trained not just to survive, but to become the woman she was meant to be. Zimora sat by the fire, listening to the crackling flames as Mama Jahi stared into the night sky. The old woman's eyes reflected the stars above, as if she could read their secrets. After a long silence, she finally spoke. You were born under the star of the lion, Mama Jahi said. Her voice was calm but filled with meaning. Do you know what that means? Zimora frowned. A lion? She asked. But I am just a girl from Ukuta. Mama Jahi smiled knowingly. No, child, you are more than you think. The lion is not just any creature. It is the ruler of the land, the protector of its people. Those born under its star are destined for greatness. But greatness is never given. It is earned. Zimora's heart pounded. She had spent so many nights thinking she was worthless, that she was weak, that she had no place in this world. But now, Mama Jahi was telling her something different. Could it be true? Could she truly be meant for something more? Mama Jahi stood and motioned for Zimora to follow. They walked deeper into the forest until they reached a small clearing. The moonlight shone down like a spotlight, illuminating the space. Mama Jahi picked up a long wooden staff and handed it to Zimora. If you wish to reclaim what was taken from you, she said, you must become strong, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. From that night on, Zimora's training began. At dawn, Mama Jahi woke her before the sun had even risen. The first lessons were simple, learning to balance, to move swiftly through the trees, to sharpen her senses. A warrior must listen more than they speak, Mama Jahi would remind her. Feel the ground beneath you, hear the wind, smell the air, every sound, every movement. It tells a story. At first, Zimora struggled. She stumbled over roots, her hands fumbled with the staff, and her legs ached from running. But she did not give up. Every day, she got better. As weeks turned into months, her training became harder. She learned to fight, not with anger, but with precision. Mama Jahi taught her how to wield a staff, how to disarm an opponent, how to defend herself, even against a stronger enemy. Strength is not only in the body, Mama Jahi would say, it is in the mind. The clever fighter wins before the battle even begins. Zimora also learned the wisdom of the ancients. Mama Jahi told her stories of great leaders, of warriors who fought not for revenge, but for justice. She taught her the power of patience, the weight of responsibility, and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. The forest became her home, but it also became her teacher. She studied the stars, the rivers, the animals. She learned how to track footprints, how to find food even in the harshest seasons, how to heal wounds with the right herbs. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been cast away. She was becoming something else, something stronger. Years passed, and the weak, abandoned girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who moved with the grace of a panther and the strength of a lioness. Mama Jahi watched her with pride. You are ready, she finally said one evening. Zimora looked at her, her heart steady, her spirit strong. She had trained for this moment. She had waited for the day she would return to Ukuta, not as a forgotten girl, but as the woman she was meant to be. She tightened her grip on her staff, her eyes shining with determination. "Then it is time," she said. "I will take back my destiny." Back in Ukuta, life had taken a dark turn. Baba Kiano, once the strong and respected elder of the village, had fallen gravely ill. His body was weak, and his mind was clouded with fever. Wandia, his wife, no longer cared for him as she once had. Instead, she and her daughter Shani used his sickness as an excuse to waste the wealth that Baba Kiano had carefully built over the years. They threw lavish feasts for themselves, buying expensive clothes and trinkets, while the rest of the village saw their prosperity slip away. What was once a village full of life and abundance now looked like a shadow of itself. The villagers whispered amongst themselves, watching as their once rich land turned into poverty. They could no longer look to Baba Kiano for guidance. His condition worsened with each passing day. Wandia, still obsessed with keeping up appearances, did little to help. She was more focused on her own desires than on her husband or the people around her. Shani, her daughter, followed her every move, using her mother's manipulation to further her own selfish goals. One evening, after the sun had set, the elders gathered at the village's council hut. The air was thick with worry, and the villagers gathered around, waiting for any news. The elders decided that they would send a small group to find this warrior, to beg for help before it was too late. They had no other choice. As the group prepared to leave, they were filled with both hope and dread. Ukuta, once a thriving and proud village, was now on the brink of destruction. The warriors of Kibwe were approaching, and if the rumors were true, only the mysterious stranger could save them. The villagers waited, hoping that this warrior was more than just a myth, that the help they so desperately needed was real. Little did they know, the savior they sought had already returned to Ukuta, ready to face the chaos that had overtaken her homeland. Zimora arrived at the edge of Ukuta, just as the first light of dawn broke across the sky. The village was eerily quiet, the tension of impending danger hanging in the air. She had come back, but not as the frightened girl who had been abandoned in the forest. Now she was a warrior, strong, determined, and ready to face whatever threat lay ahead. Dressed in the simple but effective armor of a seasoned fighter, her face hidden behind a dark veil, Zamora approached the village square. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, her steps firm and purposeful. Word had spread that a mysterious warrior had arrived, but no one knew who she was. Her cloak and armor concealed her identity, and she intended to keep it that way for now. What mattered was not who she was, but what she could do for Ukuta. The elders, desperate for help, quickly gathered to hear her offer. "I have come to fight for Ukuta," Zimora said in a steady voice, her tone unwavering. "I can defeat Mansa Kibwe's men, but I will need your trust." The villagers looked at each other, uncertain, but the urgency of the situation made them listen. Without another option, they agreed to let her fight. Zimora wasted no time. She led the villagers to the clearing where Kibwe's warriors had set up camp, their armor glinting in the sunlight. The warlord's army was large and powerful, but Zamora was swift, her movements fluid and precise. She struck with the speed of a storm, knocking down one warrior after another with skill and grace. She didn't rely on brute strength, but on her training and the wisdom Mama Jai had instilled in her. Her fight was not one of rage, but of strategy and purpose. The villagers watched from a distance, their eyes wide with awe, as Zimora defeated Kibwe's fiercest fighters. She was a force to be reckoned with, and before long, the invading warriors were retreating, unable to match her strength and skill. The villagers cheered, shouting praises for the mysterious warrior who had saved them. They did not know her name, nor could they see her face, but it didn't matter. She had proven herself, and their village was safe. For now, after the battle was won, Zimora stood tall, her eyes scanning the village. As she turned to walk away, she came face to face with Baba Kiano. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The recognition was instant. He looked deeply into her eyes, the same eyes that had once belonged to his daughter, the daughter he had thought lost forever. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Zimora," he whispered, hardly believing it. Zimora didn't answer at first. She only nodded, a single tear escaping from under her veil. She had returned, not for glory, but to fulfill her destiny and to show her father and her village that the girl they had abandoned was not weak, but strong. She was the warrior Ukuta needed, And now, her journey had come full circle. The village square fell silent as Zimora slowly reached up and removed the warrior mask that had concealed her face. The crowd, still reeling from the fierce battle they had just witnessed, gasped in unison. No one expected the warrior who had saved them to be the same girl they had thought lost forever. Zimora's face, strong and determined, was now revealed to all. The villagers stood in awe, unable to process what they were seeing. Wandia, who had been standing among the villagers, stared at Zimora with disbelief. Her hands trembled, her face pale as she took a step backward. You were left for dead," she stammered, her voice shaking with fear and guilt. Zimora's eyes, cold and unwavering, locked onto her stepmother's. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady and full of conviction. "But I was never weak," Zimora declared, "and now I return, not for revenge, but for justice." The villagers, still in shock, began to murmur among themselves. They had heard stories of Zimora's disappearance, of the rumors that she had been abandoned in the forest and never seen again, but they never knew the truth of what had really happened. With a calm but powerful presence, Zimora turned to face her father, Baba Kiano, who had been watching her closely, his eyes filled with recognition and regret. He had spent years thinking that Zimora had been a curse, that her presence had brought misfortune to their family. But now it was clear that his judgment had been clouded by the lies of his wife. Zimora addressed the village, her voice strong and clear. "The one who caused all of this pain," she said, pointing to Wandia, "is the one who deceived you all. She lied to my father, telling him that I was cursed, that I brought misfortune to our house. And with that lie, she made him believe that he had to abandon me. She stole his wealth and used it for her own selfish desires, leaving us in ruin." The crowd was stunned as the truth began to unfold. The very woman who had claimed to care for them, the one who had stood at Baba Kiano's side, had been the cause of his suffering. She had manipulated him, taking advantage of his love and trust. And now, Zimora had come to set the record straight. Wandia, realizing that the truth was out, tried to defend herself. "No, it's not what you think," she cried out, but her voice lacked the strength it once had. She had no more lies to hide behind. The villagers saw her for what she truly was, a cruel and manipulative woman who had torn apart a family for her own gain. Zimora turned her gaze back to Baba Kiano, who was now visibly shaken by the revelation. "Father," she said softly, "I do not seek revenge. I do not want to punish anyone. I only want the truth to be known, and for the village to be restored to what it once was." The elders, who had been silent witnesses to the drama unfolding before them, now stepped forward. They, too, were filled with shame for having let Wandia's lies influence their judgment for so long. They turned to Zimora with respect and gratitude, realizing that she had not only saved their village, but had also brought justice to a family torn apart by betrayal. As Wandia and Shani stood there, defeated and exposed, Zimora turned away from them. "You will no longer have the privilege of calling yourselves part of this family," she said coldly. "You will leave Ukuta and never return." Wandia and Shani were left with nothing. The wealth they had squandered, the lies they had told, and the power they had stolen were all gone. They had no choice but to leave the village they had once ruled, with nothing to show for their years of deception. The villagers watched them go, no longer feeling pity, but relief. Zimora's heart was heavy, but it was also lighter than it had been in years. She had not come back for revenge, but for justice, for herself, for her father, and for the village she loved. The truth had been revealed, and now, with her strength and wisdom, she would lead Ukuta into a new chapter of prosperity and peace. Wandia and Shani, now stripped of their power and wealth, were forced to leave Ukuta. The villagers watched as they walked away, their heads bowed in shame. They had no one to turn to, no home to return to, and no protection left. Their days of manipulating and deceiving the people of Ukuta were over. As they disappeared into the distance, Zimora felt no joy in their misfortune. She had come back for justice, not revenge, but she knew that their banishment was the only way to restore peace to the village. The curse of their deceit was finally broken, and the village could begin to heal. With Wandia and Shani gone, Zimora became the center of attention. The villagers, once unsure of her, now saw her as their savior. She had brought them victory in battle, restored their hope, and revealed the truth. Her strength and wisdom had proven that she was the leader they needed, and now they wanted her to lead them officially. The elders, who had once believed in Wandia's lies, stepped forward and offered her the title of chief. They acknowledged the courage she had shown and the wisdom she possessed, and they knew she was the one who could guide Ukuta into a brighter future. Zimora accepted the offer, but not out of a desire for power. She accepted because she believed in the future of Ukuta and knew that with her leadership, the village could thrive. She was not just a warrior. She was a healer, a teacher, and a protector of her people. Under her guidance, Ukuta flourished. She made decisions with compassion, always considering what was best for her people, and her wisdom brought peace and prosperity to the village. Her name, once whispered with pity as a forsaken daughter, was now chanted with pride. The people no longer saw her as the abandoned girl from the forest, but as the strong, capable leader who had saved them from destruction. Zimora's journey from a discarded daughter to a powerful queen was complete. The girl who had been betrayed by her family and cast out into the wilderness had returned not just as a survivor, but as a queen in her own right. Her story became a legend, told from generation to generation as an example of resilience, justice, and the power of truth. And so, the forsaken daughter became the queen her stepmother had never imagined she could be. Just as Zimora prepared to take her place as the new leader of Ukuta, an unexpected challenge arose. Chief Baraka, a man who had once plotted with the evil warlord Mansa Kibwe, refused to accept a woman as the ruler of the village. He was a powerful and influential figure in Ukuta, and he believed that only a man could hold such an important position. His pride and stubbornness pushed him to challenge Zimora's authority. "If you wish to rule this village, you must pass the trial of the ancestors," he declared, his voice filled with arrogance. The trial of the ancestors was a dangerous and sacred ritual, one that had been passed down through generations. It was said to be a test of strength, courage, and wisdom, and only those truly worthy could survive it. The trial required Zimora to travel to the Valley of Spirits, a place known for its wild animals, raging rivers, and ancient spirits. Many had attempted the trial in the past, but few had ever returned. Those who did often came back broken, their minds haunted by the trials they had faced. Despite the fear and danger, Zimora knew she had no choice but to accept the challenge. With the determination and courage that had defined her journey, Zimora set off alone for the Valley of Spirits. Along the way, she faced terrifying wild beasts that prowled the forests, their eyes glowing in the darkness. The rivers she crossed were wild and fast, their waters roaring as they threatened to swallow her whole. And the valley itself was filled with strange, haunting visions, shadows of the past, the future, and the spirits of those who had failed the trial. But Zimora was not afraid. She carried with her the wisdom and teachings of Mama Jahi, and she trusted in her own strength and resilience. As she made her way through the Valley of Spirits, Zimora felt a sense of peace settle within her. She knew that this journey, though dangerous, was the final step in proving her worth to her people. She pushed forward, overcoming every obstacle in her path, until she reached the heart of the valley where the ancestors awaited. There, she was granted the sacred stone of leadership, a powerful symbol of her victory and her right to rule. Zimora returned to Ukuta, carrying the stone with pride. The villagers had been waiting anxiously for her return, and when they saw her standing before them, unharmed and victorious, they knew she was the true leader of their village. The elders, who had once doubted her, now bowed before her in respect. "You are not just our leader," they said, their voices filled with awe. "You are the lioness of Ukuta." Zimora had passed the final test and earned her place as the queen of Ukuta. Her courage, strength, and wisdom had proven that she was not only capable of leading her people, but destined to do so. The village, once torn apart by lies and betrayal, was now united under her reign, and Ukuta thrived as it had never before. Years passed, and Ukuta thrived under Zimora's leadership. She had transformed the village into a place of peace and prosperity, and her name was known far and wide. However, one day, the village was shaken when two figures appeared at the gates, Wandia and Shani, now old and frail. Their once proud posture had turned into a haggard, desperate plea. With tear-streaked faces, they begged for mercy. "We have nothing left," Wandia sobbed, her voice filled with regret. "Please forgive us. We were wrong. We thought we could destroy you, but now we see how foolish we were." Zimora, now a strong and respected queen, stood before them with a calm and steady gaze. Despite the years of suffering they had caused her, Zimora did not allow bitterness or hatred to cloud her heart. She had seen the pain and destruction that hatred caused, and she refused to become a part of it. "I will not let hatred define me," Zimora said quietly, her voice firm, yet compassionate. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything was still. She had every right to turn them away, to make them suffer as they had made her suffer, but she chose a different path. Instead of banishing them or seeking revenge, Zimora made a decision. She allowed them to stay in the village, but their status was no longer that of nobles. Wandia and Shani, stripped of their wealth and power, were now forced to live the rest of their lives in humility. They would work for the villagers, serving as common folk and contributing to the community they had once tried to destroy. Every day, they were reminded of the woman they had betrayed, now the most powerful and respected leader in Ukuta. Zimora's greatness was impossible to ignore, and as they worked in the village, they could only watch in silence as she shone brighter than they had ever imagined. They had once believed that they could take her down, but it was Zimora who had emerged victorious. And so, the girl they had once abandoned and mistreated became the queen who ruled Ukuta with wisdom and strength, her name revered by all. Wandia and Shani were left to reflect on their actions, knowing they had tried to destroy the very person who would become the heart and soul of the village. The girl they had once betrayed had become the most powerful woman in Ukuta, and their fate was sealed in the shadow of her greatness.